The White House, 1987. At midnight, Ronald Reagan walked alone into the basement. A dying janitor was taking his last breaths. What Reagan whispered to him in those final moments stayed secret for 30 years, until the janitor's daughter found a letter. It was March 15th. Spring was trying to break through in Washington, but the nights were still cold. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago. The residence was quiet except for the usual night security, the soft hum of heating systems through old pipes and occasional footsteps echoing through marble hallways. Ronald Reagan, at 76 years old, couldn't sleep. It happened more often these days. The weight of the presidency pressing down, the constant decisions that affected millions. The knowledge that one wrong move with the Soviets could trigger global catastrophe. Sometimes his mind just wouldn't shut off. Nancy was already asleep. He'd kissed her forehead and told her he was going to read for a while in his study. After all these years, she understood when he needed to walk to clear his head. But Reagan didn't go to his study. He went downstairs, past the staterooms, past the offices, down the staff corridors where tourists never walked. He liked to wander sometimes at night when the cameras were off and the aides weren't watching. When he could just be a man walking through a building instead of the president walking through history. That's when he heard it, a cough, wet and rattling, coming from the basement level where maintenance kept their equipment and supplies. Reagan stopped, listened. There it was again. He descended the narrow stairs, his Secret Service detail following at a discreet distance. They'd learned that when the president went wandering at night, you didn't interfere unless there was danger. The basement was dimly lit. Industrial pipes ran along the ceiling. The walls were plain concrete, unpainted. This wasn't the White House people saw in photographs. This was the machinery, the guts of the building. In a small room at the end of the hall, a single lamp was burning. Reagan walked toward it. The door was ajar. Inside, he saw a man lying on a cot covered with a thin blanket. The man was black, probably in his 60s, though illness had aged him. His breathing was labored. Each inhale seemed to take everything he had. "Hello?" Reagan said softly. The man's eyes opened. For a moment, he just stared. Then recognition flickered across his face, followed immediately by embarrassment. He tried to sit up. "Mr. President, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be—" "Don't." Reagan held up a hand. "Don't apologize. What's your name?" James Whitmore. I worked maintenance. His voice was weak. "I'm sorry about the mess." Reagan looked around. The room was spotless. A mop and bucket in the corner. Cleaning supplies organized on metal shelves. A small frame photograph on an upturned crate serving as a bedside table. Two young girls smiling at the camera. "Your daughters?" Reagan asked, pointing at the photo. James's face softened. "Yes, sir. Keisha and Maya. They don't know I'm here. They think I'm at the hospital." "Why aren't you?" What James said next revealed something nobody in the White House knew. James looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. "Because I can't afford it anymore. My insurance ran out last month. The treatments, they cost more than I make in a year. And if I go to the hospital, they'll want to admit me, keep me there. And then who'll pay my rent? Who'll make sure my girls have food?" Reagan felt something cold settle in his chest. "What about family? Friends? My wife died 8 years ago, cancer. We spent everything we had trying to save her, never quite recovered financially." James coughed again, his whole body convulsing. When he finally caught his breath, there were tears in his eyes. "I've been sleeping here for 3 weeks, after my shifts. I told the girls I picked up a night security job. They're 17 and 14. Old enough to take care of themselves for a bit, young enough that they still believe me when I lie." "What's wrong with you, medically?" "Lung cancer, stage 4. The doctors said maybe 3 months. That was 5 weeks ago." He smiled weakly. "I'm trying to make it to June. Keisha graduates high school in June. I promised her I'd be there. That's the only promise I've got left to keep." Reagan sat down on a metal folding chair. The Secret Service agent in the hallway shifted uncomfortably, but didn't intervene. "Tell me about them, your daughters." James's eyes lit up despite his pain. "Keisha wants to be a teacher. She's got a scholarship to college, full ride, first person in our family ever to go. Maya, she's the artist, draws all the time. Her room is covered in sketches." His expression darkened. "They're going to be alone soon. I've been trying to save money, but between the rent and the treatments I could afford and food, there's nothing left. After I'm gone, they'll have to figure it out." "What about their mother's family?" "Nobody left. It's just us." He looked directly at Reagan. "I'm not telling you this to ask for help, Mr. President. I know you've got a whole country to run. It's nice to tell someone the truth. I've been lying for so long." But something had shifted in Reagan. Something was happening that would stay hidden for 3 decades. Reagan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "My father was an alcoholic. Did you know that?" James shook his head slightly. "Jack Reagan, shoe salesman. Good man when he was sober. But the bottle got him more often than not. I found him passed out on the porch one winter night when I was 11, just lying there in the snow. I had to drag him inside. My mother cried. My brother and I pretended everything was fine." Reagan looked at James. "I learned early that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones struggling the hardest. And sometimes they hide it because they don't want to be a burden. I'm sorry, sir. Don't be. It taught me something. It taught me that dignity matters, that a man's worth isn't measured by his paycheck or his title. It's measured by what he does for the people he loves when nobody's watching." Reagan leaned forward. "You've been sleeping in a basement dying so your daughters can finish school. That's not weakness, James. That's heroism." Tears rolled down James's face. "I'm scared, not of dying. I made peace with that. I'm scared they won't be okay, that I'm leaving them with nothing." Reagan stood up. "Wait here." He walked out into the hallway. The Secret Service agent stepped forward. "Sir, get me a phone, now, and clear this hallway." What happened over the next 2 hours would remain classified until long after both men were dead. Reagan made phone calls, quiet calls, personal calls, not official White House business. He reached out to contacts, friends, people who owed him favors. By 2 a.m., he had secured several things. A spot in the best cancer treatment facility in Washington for James, fully funded through a private medical charity that Reagan personally ensured would cover all costs. A trust fund for Keisha and Maya, anonymously funded, that would cover their education and living expenses for the next 10 years. A lawyer who would handle all the paperwork, pro bono, to ensure the girls would be taken care of no matter what happened. Reagan came back to the basement room at 2:30 a.m. James had fallen asleep. Reagan stood there for a moment, watching the labored breathing, the thin frame under the blanket. He gently shook James's shoulder. "James, wake up." James's eyes fluttered open. "Mr. President?" Reagan sat back down in the metal chair. "I need you to listen carefully. You're going to Walter Reed tomorrow. I've arranged it. Everything is covered. You're going to get treatment. Real treatment. I can't." "You can. It's done." Reagan pulled out a piece of White House stationery and a pen. He started writing. "Your daughters will be taken care of. Education, living expenses, all of it. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. You have to tell them the truth. Not about me. Not about tonight, but about you, about what you've been going through. They deserve to know, and they're stronger than you think." James was crying openly now. "Why? Why would you do this?" Reagan finished writing and folded the paper. He held it for a moment, considering. "Because 35 years ago, a movie studio executive took a chance on me when I was just another actor trying to make it. He didn't have to. I wasn't the most talented, I wasn't the most connected, but he saw something. He gave me a shot, and it changed my life." He looked at James. We don't get to choose when we can help somebody. We only get to choose if we do. Tonight I can help. So I am. He handed James the folded letter. Don't open this now. Open it if things get hard. If you feel like giving up. If your daughters need something to understand. James clutched the letter like it was made of gold. I don't know how to thank you. Be there in June. Walk Keisha across that graduation stage. Draw pictures with Maya. That's thanks enough. Reagan stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. This stays between us. No press, no interviews, no thank you letters to the White House. Can you give me that? Yes, sir. I promise. A good man. Reagan shook his hand gently, careful not to hurt him. I'll check on you. They won't tell you it's me checking. But I will be. Reagan walked out of the basement. He went back upstairs. Kissed Nancy's forehead again. She didn't wake up. He finally fell asleep at 4 a.m. James Whitmore went to Walter Reed the next day. The treatment was aggressive but state-of-the-art. His daughters were told everything. They cried, they held him, they forgave him for lying, and he fought. God, he fought. James lived to see Keisha graduate in June. He was in a wheelchair, thin and weak, but he was there. She walked across the stage, turned, and blew him a kiss. He cried through the whole ceremony. He lived to see Maya's first art show at her high school that fall. 15 of her drawings on display. He stood in front of each one, leaning on a walker, telling anyone who would listen that his daughter made this. James Whitmore died on November 3, 1987. Peacefully, at home. His daughters on either side of him holding his hands. His last words were, I kept my promises. In his effects, Keisha and Maya found the letter. They opened it together 3 days after the funeral, sitting at their kitchen table in the small apartment they'd grown up in. The apartment that somehow they'd been able to keep living in even after their father got sick. The rent that had always been mysteriously paid. They'd never understood how, just accepted it as some kind of miracle. Now they were beginning to realize it wasn't a miracle. It was a promise kept. Reagan's handwriting was distinctive, flowing but strong. The letter said, James, if you're reading this, things got harder than we hoped. I'm sorry for that, but I want your daughters to know something. Their father was the bravest man I met in my entire presidency. Not because he fought a war or passed a law, but because he loved them so much he was willing to suffer in silence to protect them. That kind of love is rare. Hold on to it. Honor it by living good lives. By being kind. By helping someone when nobody's watching. Your father showed me that real heroism doesn't happen on stages or in front of cameras. It happens in basements and quiet moments, in the choices we make when we think nobody will know. I knew, and I was honored to help. R.R. Maya read it out loud, her voice breaking halfway through. When she finished, both sisters sat in silence. Then Keisha said, He met the president. The president sat with him at midnight in a basement. Maya looked at the letter again, touching the signature like it might disappear, and never told anyone. That's why Dad could afford treatment. That's why we stayed in this apartment. That's why I got to go to college. Keisha was crying now. It was him. All of it. Keisha and Maya kept that letter private for 30 years. Keisha became a teacher just like she planned. Maya became a professional artist. Both of them spent their lives helping people, quietly, without fanfare. In 2017, after both Reagan and Nancy had passed, Keisha decided it was time. She was 47 years old, a school principal now. Maya was 44, a mother of 2. They donated the letter to the Reagan Presidential Library. They told the story publicly for the first time. A reporter asked Keisha why they'd waited so long. She thought carefully before answering. Because Dad promised President Reagan it would stay private, and we promised Dad we'd honor everything he taught us, but 30 years felt like enough time, and we thought maybe people needed to hear it. That the president they remember for speeches and policies was also a man who sat with a dying janitor at midnight, who made calls in the middle of the night for someone who couldn't vote for him anymore, couldn't help his career, couldn't do anything except die with dignity. Do you think Reagan would want this story told? Maya smiled. I think he wouldn't care either way. That's the point. He didn't do it for credit. He did it because it was right, because our dad mattered, because we mattered. There's a lesson in that midnight encounter that echoes across the decades. Power is nothing if you don't use it to see people, the ones in the shadows, the ones doing the work nobody notices, the ones dying quietly while trying to protect the people they love. Reagan had nuclear codes in his pocket. He could have started wars or ended them. He shaped policy that affected millions, but that night in the basement, none of that mattered. What mattered was one man recognizing another man's dignity, sitting with him, listening, acting. James Whitmore never made headlines, never gave a speech, never changed policy, but he mattered. And Reagan knew it. That's what leadership looks like when it's stripped down to its core, not the photo ops or the grand gestures, but the midnight promises, the quiet actions, the help that doesn't come with a press release. In the end, we're not measured by the crowds who applaud us. We're measured by the people we sat with in the dark. Subscribe for more untold human stories from America's past.